Thank you, everyone, for coming to this session where we're going to, in a lot more detail, talk about the 5 keys to transformative growth. My name is Jeff Shuck. I'm the co-leader of Plenty, and with me is Jennifer Mulholland, who is getting a quick microphone adjustment. I don't see anything happening up here. How many of you joined us in the session immediately prior? Let me try it a different way. How many of you were not in the session immediately prior? Okay, thank you. The room is split. What we are going to do is very briefly orient you to this model that you have behind us. Then we're going to allow you to, with the questions in front of you, just assess how you and your organization are aligned for growth according to the model. And there's a reason that we say you and your organization. We'll talk about that. Then we're going to get you interacting with each other and try to unpack the results. And the goal of this is to help you understand what we have learned through a couple dozen years of working with groups like you and being idealists ourselves, which is that growth doesn't come from one set of tactics. Tactics are important, and we can talk about those as we go. But growth comes from having a holistic approach, taking care of yourself and the people around you, and making sure that you're aligned with what you actually care about.
So those of you that are new or walking in, we are going to use an assessment in a few minutes, so raise your hand if you need that. Again, my name is Jennifer Mulholland, and Jeff and I co-lead a firm called Plenty. It's plentyconsulting.com. We have a retreat center in Park City, Utah called Heart Space, where we bring organizations and individuals and idealists like you to come and experience transformation in these 5 keys. We also have offices in Michigan City, Indiana, and North Carolina, kind of spread around the country. We do a lot of traveling and working with the idealist sector, which is any nonprofit or for-profit that is really focused on increasing social impact and making this world a better place, which is really what our experience and love is. So when Jeff talks about the 5 keys, we're just going to briefly orient you to this model as a holistic approach to unlock abundance, unlock transformational growth for yourself and your organization. Everything we do at Plenty is at the organizational level and it's at the individual level, because we believe organizations are made up of people and we need to treat, serve, and support the whole person. And that is our perspective with these 5 keys. So if you've heard this before in the previous section, just bear with us. We'll do a little repeat. But these 5 keys, if you will, work together. We consider these doorways. Clients and people come to us given what is most precedent, what is most concerning, what is the most present problem they're trying to solve. So you can look at these as different gateways, if you will, in terms of unlocking growth. So let's begin with funding.
So the shorthand of the whole model, you kind of heard us, if you were in the last session, tee this up briefly. It goes like this. Fundraising issues are actually strategy issues. Strategy issues are actually leadership issues. Leadership issues are actually well-being issues. And the answer to well-being issues lie in the community. Okay, that's kind of our summary of our worldview. The idea of funding is that funding is often looked as the goal, right? I need to get $1 million in order to X. I need to fill a budget hole of 5 million or 10 million if you are lucky enough to work in an organization that big. I need to get funding for this program so we can do something else. Our viewpoint is that that is often the least likely way to get funding, and Saul talked about that this morning. Funding is actually a means to an end, not the end itself. Constructing programs to hit a monetary goal seldom sets you up for long-term growth, even if you do hit that goal. And often there's a more entrepreneurial look at things needed. And naturally, we're entrepreneurs. We both founded a number of companies. So we take an entrepreneurial look at funding, which is you don't say that you'll cross the chasm when you build the bridge. You say, I'm going to cross the chasm. Now, how do I build the bridge, right? So you say, this is what I'm doing. Now I'm going to get the funding to support it. Not, if I get the funding, this is what we'll do. I know for some of you it sounds like just a mental shift. It's a shift in more than mentality, although that alone is important. It's a shift in how we approach who we solicit, how we solicit, what kind of funds we solicit, and why.
It also informs how we look at funding and our relationship to money. If you really think about it, money is energy. Like, how do we create a symbiotic flow of receiving and then giving? Like, that is the idea of the abundance machine, right? The more we give, the more we have. And so this idea of reciprocity around funding is something that we help organizations look at in different creative ways depending upon what model makes most sense for them. We often see that funding issues really are strategy issues, right? So oftentimes when we're having a challenge with funding, we're not clear about who we are and where we're going. That's the whole intent of strategy. Strategy is about alignment. It's not about making plans. And we talked a little bit in the previous session about it's way more about the why. It's more about the conversation than it is about the what. When we talk with teams and when we create conversations that help to unveil what people care about and we align what they care about, we call that passion. What people are passionate about aligns to the people that we're trying to activate. So think of strategy as needing to be flexible and agile and responsive in today's world. It's the new way that, it's not even new, the way that change is speeding up. The only way we can adapt to it is to be flexible and dynamic and present.
The idea is that no amount of operational excellence, right? No amount of rigor, you're not measured by success on how long the strategic planning document is, right? That's actually irrelevant. And honestly, the longer it is, the less likely that anyone in your organization knows what it is. So no amount of operational excellence can make up for the fact that people don't agree on something. This is a very different viewpoint than most business models out there. For example, Balanced Scorecard. Has anyone ever had a run-in with Balanced Scorecard? Which is a business model of strategic development that basically says, pick all these areas in the organization and get great at all of them. Well, think about that. Strategy is actually about picking a few things to focus on, deciding what you don't do, and getting great at those things, and then making sure everyone in the organization is aligned on those few things. Strategy is not about being excellent at everything. That is a recipe to get you stressed out and have a long document that nobody reads. So the idea at Plenty is that strategy is about a process itself, and when we take groups through strategy, it's about a 3-month process, but the centerpiece is 3 days together at our place in Park City where we make sure everyone's aligned on the right things. That gets us to the idea of leadership, and we have more time in this session to unpack it than we did in the last session. The real quick summary here, as you can see on the back, is that leadership, if it ever was about authority or about hierarchy, that world is gone, right? In a world where you can broadcast your intentions to everyone in your circle and they can magnify it, in a world where we essentially have frictionless information, where you can find out, you can actually watch the press conference that was held yesterday in the cabinet meeting. You don't have to read someone's account on it. You can make judgments yourself about the leadership that you see coming from your organization, from your government, from your family, whatever it is. The leadership, more and more, the currency of leadership is being true, is being authentic. Now that's different than being brazen. We often find that people confuse brashness with authenticity. Brashness is just being brash. Authenticity is about being true to yourself and being intrinsically motivated.
Yeah, and it takes a whole lot less energy to be yourself than it does to be somebody else, right? This idea that actually I'm enough right now. I am completely enough as a leader. And my vulnerability, showing you all that, is okay. This idea that leaders somehow have it all put together is total bullshit. It just is. Leaders have insecurities, right? When we're trying to mobilize teams, what mobilizes them is to show them that we're real, that we're listening, that we're honest, that we're vulnerable. And we're seeing more and more how much courage and bravery that's taking, and how few people have a roadmap to find that blueprint for themselves. That's one of the things that we do at Plenty, is help people really find their unique blueprint so they can activate and harness the unique blueprints of those around them. When you talk to leaders, oftentimes they confide in you, not so much about the business goals, but really how stressed out they are, that their marriages are falling apart, that their kids are acting out in school, that they've got so much going on, they don't know how to balance the demands of their work life and personal lives, right? They don't know how to care for themselves. And really, guys, there's no instructions for that. It's unique to all of us. So we put well-being at the top of the center, really, of this framework, because we've experienced it, we've lived it, we've been trained in different modalities of health, happiness, and well-being. And we fundamentally believe that we're living in an era, a time right now, where there is no such thing anymore as a personal life and a professional life. We live one life, and we as human beings are the common denominator. We bring our whole selves to either place. And our workplace, and that old school thinking that you have to leave your personal stuff at home, just perpetuates the box. It perpetuates the glass ceiling. It perpetuates an inauthentic living, right? So this idea that what if we could bring our whole self to work and at home? What would that look like for us? How do we care for ourselves and our teams in giving them the nourishment, the presence, the care to be them whole selves? Jeff mentioned before that well-being isn't soft anymore. It actually is an imperative to increasing performance, right? The clearer our minds, the more present we are, the healthier and balanced we are, the higher our performance, right? The better we work with others, the better we're able to receive insights wherever you believe those come from. And that's the intention of harnessing growth and harnessing transformation, is to being tuned in to something greater than yourself, to being tuned into yourself, and then tuned in to the people that you lead.
And I'm really struck in this sector particularly. So we work in a lot of different sectors. This is kind of where our hearts is and where our bread and butter is. I'm struck at the well-being double talk, right? It's perfectly okay for you to have your laptop up and be working until midnight. Oh, that's fine. You can take your work home. But man, mention spirituality in the workplace? No, that doesn't belong here. Or mention that you had a rough day with your kids in a meeting? Hey, leave that somewhere else. Now that's changing, but honestly, in a lot of the bigger, older cultures, that is very much in place. So we're trying to wake people up to that double standard. It is absolutely there. We want you to work 80 hours. We're going to pay you for 40. And by the way, don't complain about it. Now, some organizations are more subtle, I guess, in that oppression than others, but it's out there. The other thing in this sector, I'm going to kind of take us back to the orange before we go to purple, is there's absolutely an undeniable link between funding and well-being. Think of your personal life. Other than maybe your relationship with your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, partner, significant other, is there anything you stress about more than your job? Particularly when you don't have one, right? Like, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to pay these bills? I just put a down payment on a car, all those things. There's such a link between funding and well-being, but we're supposed to not talk about it. Well, that gets us to community. So the idea of all of these things is the actual answers are out there, right? We have some of them, but you have some of them too. Your donors know what they want. They know what programs are interesting. Your customers know what they want, what brands appeal to them. The staff knows how they'd prefer to be led. They know what kind of policies they'd like for the organization. Like, we all together are willing to brave 110-degree heat to sit in a room to talk about how we can do this better, right? The answers are here, and that's really where the keys come to root, is in community. The content's among all of us, not in one place, not in one encyclopedia, or not in one authority anymore.
And how we activate that community is shifting. In the past, the hierarchical model of telling people what to do was a way to activate community. Now that's crumbling. It's crumbling because of the new paradigm that's all about collaboration and cooperation. It's why we're here at the collaborative, right? It's harnessing the collective. So the skill to activate and to practice and to hone, quite honestly, is your ability to first be present, and then two, to deeply listen. This is how we activate community. It's literally listening with nothing on your mind, and then asking the right question, not assuming you know the answer, not waiting to respond, right? It's really deeply listening to what's behind our donors' needs, what's behind the team member and what they care about, what is motivating them, where's their passion coming from. This idea of connecting peer to peer, we call it passion to passion, comes from a new skill that many of us need to practice better, right? Deeply listening to each other. So we're going to give you an opportunity to evaluate yourself and then deeply listen to where you are, where you want to be. And then we're going to get you to share it intimately with hopefully a stranger or somebody sitting next to you. So you all have a sheet of paper, and if you don't, please raise your hand. We'll get you a paper and pen. We'd like you to take a couple minutes and answer these questions. The instructions are at the top. So you are going to use the following scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, to assign a value on the colored line to the left of each question. And then after you've done that, after each section, you sum up the values. So you'll create a subtotal for each key and then a total at the bottom. Make sense? Just
so two quick points. We're going to get you a few in the back there. 2 quick points. One, I mentioned this earlier, but I want to say it again. People will ask us, do I answer as myself, or do I answer as a team member in my organization? Well, how are you splitting yourself in that way? The answer is yes. You are yourself and you work in an organization. So you answer as your whole person. The second thing is for my type A's. Where are the type A's among you? You can't win, okay? You can't be better than anybody. The idea is not to get the best score. The idea is know thyself. So give yourself a break. It's not about getting to 100. It's about just taking stock. So take a few minutes, and we'll be back in a second. We're going to go towel off while you're doing that. Okay, now how are we doing? Raise your hand if you're done or almost done. As you're finishing up, just take a minute to do a scan. Look at it. What areas are surprising to you? What confirm what you probably already know? Where do you see the biggest numbers? Where do you see the lowest?
Okay, we would love for you to find somebody around you, ideally that you don't know. Introduce yourself and share what you're observing. What did you see? Go ahead. Who are you and what do you notice? Okay. So if I can have your attention again, we are going to invite you to get up and meet somebody new and do this again.
Do the same thing again with someone else.
Same thing again, meet somebody new and share.
Don't be shy.
Okay, if we can have your attention back, please. If I whistle, it's going to be really loud over these speakers.
Don't make her whistle.
All right, so we're going to ask for some audience participation. May I have your attention? Thank you. What happened in the room? when we started talking? What happened? Somebody shout it out. What? We all have the same problems. What else?
What happened to the volume? Higher or lower? It went up.
Did the energy exchange increase or decrease? Increase. Right? Were you more comfortable sitting or moving? Moving?
You liars.
I would tell you from this vantage point, the majority felt more comfortable staying put, right? Change is hard. You have to mobilize over inertia to meet new people. That's what the collective is about. When we talk about the wisdom is in the community, you have to activate it. You activate it by engaging, by interaction, by listening, right? And if you do this in your meetings and at your work, guess what happens to the room? It energizes, right? It activates. Great decisions and solutions come from that higher energy exchange. Really intentional.
So a couple things we want to point out. Those of you who've heard us speak before, there's always kind of the content and then the meta lesson. One meta lesson is engage with each other in whatever meeting you have. It's more interesting, it's more fulfilling, the content's out there. A second lesson that we're getting at is beware of the structures and constraints around you. Here, there's a constraint that is the way the room is set up. So if you were doing this in Park City at our retreat center, aside from the fact that it'd be 30 degrees cooler, which might be nice, we deliberately don't have seating like this. We have couches. We orient people so they're predisposed to connect with one another. Think about that when you stage a meeting, when you work with your team. The construction of the room actually determines the kind of output you get. The third thing is what we're going to unpack now, which is this assessment. Now, we eventually will have a digital form. With the digital form, you cannot fan yourself. So I'm glad that we have this in paper. There's another reason, though, that we often use paper. Because it's amazing, but there's a reason that private ballots work. People are more honest. People are so much more honest. So this is just a tool aside from the 5 keys. When you go back to your team or your boss or a group that you're on the board of, the next time someone wants to make a decision, say, hey, here's an idea, let's write it on a sticky note. You'll be amazed the different result you get from 12 people or 10 people in a private ballot than a 10-person round of discussion where everyone's agreeing with the most influential person in the room. It's uncanny and it happens every time. But I'm going to violate that rule now because I'm going to ask you to go public a little bit. I'd love for you to just level set on what's here. So we use this diagnostic in our engagements at the beginning just to get a sense from our clients of where they think they are. So I know you were probably told there would be no math, and I apologize for the addition that we've put in front of you today. But when you look at the bottom, right, how many of you, show us your hands if you have a score of 75 or above? Wow, not many. All right, 50 to 75. All right, there's anyone under 50? A few of you. So generally our guidelines are, 75 and above. And this is, again, you can't win at this. You can't win at life. We're all going to the same place. It's just to find out where we are. 75 or above, if we're coming in to develop a campaign or develop a new strategy, we'll say, you're pretty aligned, we're good to go. This life isn't perfect. We're going to address these issues as we go. 50 to 75 is more, before we create that new fundraising campaign, or before we hire that new CEO, or before we try a new marketing initiative over in Purple, we should probably repair some things first, right? A very common one to see is like great scores and a 5 in well-being. I was ranting about this in the previous session. This is an organization that's growing on the backs of its team, essentially, right? Or a 5 or a 20 in all the sections and then something really low in funding. A lot of idealism, a lot of alignment. We don't have the horsepower to make it happen. Under 50, we're basically in like heal mode. There's something deep-seated that needs to be addressed, and we're not going to move forward on a new initiative until we can collaborate and calibrate on where things are now. Let's do unpacking of the individuals areas a little bit. So for whom was leadership your highest? Take a look around. How about community? Funding? The few, the proud. Strategy? Where are aligned people? Okay. And well-being. Anyone have well-being top?
Let's flip that. Raise your hand if well-being was your lowest. Leadership is your lowest. Strategy is your lowest. Funding? Community.
So this is a different viewpoint to one of the things we just heard from the audience earlier, which is we all have the same problems, right? We all have the same human experience. It manifests really differently depending on the organization and the people we surround ourselves with. What we want to do now is just give you some tools and give you a chance to participate in the dialogue a little bit. We're actually going to start with leadership because it's one that we did not get into the main session, but we'll go wherever the group wants us to go as we continue to talk. Let's start with the idea of leadership. What themes did you notice, or do we want people to interact?
Either way.
Okay.
You go.
Yeah, let's do this really quickly. Turn to the person next to you. Discuss leadership. What themes do you notice on the assessment, and what themes do you notice in your results? Okay? We're going to give you 30 seconds. Turn to someone next to you. Blue.
Okay. So we have a microphone here. Let's bring our attention back up. We're going to have a little juicy discussion about leadership with this idea that we're all connected. So your challenge is somebody else's challenge. Your strength in what you think you're great at in terms of leadership is a solution to somebody else's challenge. This is peer-to-peer at its best. When you look at your leadership scores, either where are you really strong that you'd like to share, or where are you struggling? Like, what do you notice? Where's the weakness? We have a microphone if somebody wants to raise their hand and tee us up.
Hi, I'm Harrison and I work at Nurse Family Partnership. And I think one of the challenges, our organization emerged out of academia, so we struggle with sort of trusting our intuitions. I think I personally do that, which is why I'm a cultural fit there, but we do it organizationally, sort of getting caught up in perpetually second guessing and wanting another analysis and sort of more detail and further study before committing to a course of action, which I think can be difficult or slow us down.
Does anybody else share that problem in your organization? Paralysis by analysis, right? Not trusting your intuition and your gut and needing more research and more data to prove your point of why you need to go this direction, but not really acting. Is that what I'm hearing? Who shares that in your organization? Yeah. You know, sometimes that's a great example. Sometimes it's easier to follow your inner compass. It's harder to get a team and an organization to respond to those intuitive gut checks, right? But I can tell you there's systems for that. There's agreements. There's a way we can come to decision making that embeds itself into the culture. So I'm hearing a little discrepancy of it's a cultural fit for you, but it doesn't sound like it's being modeled in the organization. Is that correct? Yeah, a little bit. So there's ways that we can first check it out. Is this the culture of the organization? And are they willing to adopt a new or more aggressive, agile model of trusting instincts? Where's the threshold where research will be outdated soon, right? Given the changing times. And where do we need to act? I think that's a really interesting part of how we infuse intuition into cultural change at the organization.
There's a mirror image of this that may resonate with others of you, and we'd say it's kind of rooted in the same issue. So this third question here is just about trust, really, intuition and trust, and the decision-making that's here as opposed to here. The flip side of this issue sounds like we shoot first and ask questions later, or kind of ready, fire, aim, right? We move really quickly. We don't check anything out. And why it's rooted in the same thing is that belief that we move really quickly is rooted in a belief of there's an urgency, there's a time demand, we're gonna miss out, right? Where yours is rooted in this, we need to know, we're not sure. And we'd say they're the same, they're two sides of the same coin, because at its root, it's almost, forgive this term because I'm not saying this to you and I don't mean it in the way it sounds, but there's an arrogance about what we can influence, right? That if we move really quickly, we're going to capitalize on something that otherwise is going to be lost. Or if we do tons and tons of research, we're going to validate something that otherwise is going to be a mistake. And this is not an easy dynamic to get at, but it's rooted in, we sometimes think it's this thing about strategic plan and having a 40-page plan. Like if the plan is 10 pages longer than a 30-page plan, it's 30% better? No, it's just longer, right? Here's a quick exercise that we use for teams to get at this. Think of last year, 2016. You got it? It's December 31st, 2016. You're celebrating with your friends, your family, you're toasting. And you're toasting the biggest thing that happened that year, right? And either you're holding up your glass and you're saying like, oh my gosh, it was such a great year because of, or you're saying, oh my gosh, I'm so glad the year is over because of this big success, this big tragedy, this big event, this big accomplishment, this big failure. You got this? You got the event in your head. Okay, go back 364 days. It's January 1st. Was that event anywhere on your radar screen? Almost every case, with the exception of I'm graduating from school, I'm having a baby, I'm getting married, almost every time we ask, everybody says no. My dad was hit by a car. We got a huge donation that we were not expecting. There was a new partnership that came into. I met someone. I wasn't even looking to meet someone. There's a divine mechanic around us that we think we influence more than we do. And that idea of like, we've got to research the hell out of it, or we've got to move quickly or we'll lose it, most of the time is not valid either way.
This is actually the heart of our leadership retreat called Lantern. And Lantern has 4 metaphors, and I'm not going to go through all 4 right now, but one of them is if you take a lantern and you put it over your head, where does it illuminate? It illuminates right in front of you, right? It shows you what the next step is. And in the changing times, we cannot foresee the changing future. Jeff's point is that things are unpredictable. We tend to believe they're divinely orchestrated, right? That there's a benevolent good working on our behalf that's always on and it's personalized. So if that was true, what is showing up right in front of me? We call it show up to what shows up. And honestly, when we take that perspective in our personal lives and in at work and at Plenty, it is incredible the pressure that falls off of our shoulders, right? Of having to figure it all out, of having to justify, of having to defend, of having to prove, of having to strive. Can anybody relate to those things besides me, right? But it sheds. And so that's the idea about not only listening to our intuition, but how do we get our teams and our organizations to really pay attention to what is right here. And I promise you, if you do that here at the Collaborative, if you just pay attention to who's coming up to meet you, to where you find yourself leaning in, to what you're hearing, to those synchronicities, magic happens. Abundance unlocks. Peace becomes us.
Yeah, and I think the last point that Jen was making at the beginning is Sometimes the organizational culture, for example, is we need to research, and we never make the decision, and you're more about, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to move forward, it's easier to find yourself another organization than it is to change everyone in the organization to your worldview. That's part of authenticity. Let's go to another comment, or should we go to another area?
Another area.
Let's go to community, all right? Same thing, turn to someone next to you, fan them with your flyer to air out their awesome ideas, and take a look at what is in the community section. What do you see about what stands out to you?
Okay, given the time, let's pause the conversation. We're going to bring it back. Who would like to share your observance about your community? Either your challenge, a question, or what you're doing well. What did you observe, or what did you hear being exchanged in your conversation about community?
Is your community too hot to reply?
Yes, right here.
The community that I work with is in Haiti, in a very, very remote part of Haiti. Different language, different culture, different needs. So connecting with them in ways that you're talking about we do. But it's not as easy to just apply the things that you're talking about when it's that distant.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had any outside the box of this problems like that one.
Can you all hear the question? So she has an organization working in Haiti, and to activate that community in the ways that we've been talking about is harder given certain barriers. Is that correct? So I would ask, is anything working in terms of how you are connecting? What's working for you?
WhatsApp?
WhatsApp. There's a lot of people where I go that don't eat every day, and they don't have electricity or running water or doctors or roads. And they're quite remote from what's going on in the world, except everyone has a cell phone now. And for the first time, we could connect on WhatsApp, which is great. It's not a forum, but we can connect better than we ever have in the last 20 years.
Yeah. So for those of you who didn't hear, they're using a tool, WhatsApp, to connect. This is one example of so many different digitized tools of how we can connect people online through technology, right? What are some other things? Do any of you connect with people that you're not able to interact with face to face? Can you raise your hand? What's working for you? Is anybody willing to share either another tool or another method? What works for you to connect? All Google Apps to connect, okay?
We're starting these quarterly call-ins with our executive director and medical team reporting on the status of our organization, and we reach out to our top donors, but we're also including that $15 to $25 donor, which is crucial moving forward.
I love that point, and that's one of the points we want to make about community. So this young lady was talking about your constituent community. You're talking about your donor community. When you think about your community, we want you to think in broad ways, and we want you to see that there are different communities. Your coworkers are a community. You're part of the community, so your family and friends are in the community. They may not right now be engaged in your cause, but they are part of the community in ways. Often, at Plenty, the connection between strategy and community for us is marketing. We don't talk about marketing. We talk about how strategy and community intersect. And often when we see a funding issue, it's because different people in the leadership, so now I'm up here, have different views of who the community is and different strategies, right? We're not aligned on the community we're serving, and so we don't have the right approach. What a donor needs to hear from us is very different than what an end grantee needs to hear from us. So this is one thing we'd ask you to think about in terms of connecting community. It's not just about the people that we're serving, it's about all the people who are serving them. And that's the connection we really want to make. And that's the giving and receiving cycle that Jennifer mentioned earlier, how we connect the people who are funding with the people who are being funded.
And when we activate community, today's world is requiring us to do that in the cloud and on the ground. So online, virtually, and through human interaction. Nothing can replace this interaction, this exchange, the human to human, passion to passion, heart to heart exchange of activating community and movements, and ultimately helping you make this world a better place. So thank you for joining us today. If you'd like more information, please visit us at plentyconsulting.com. We'd love to invite you to Heart Space in Park City, Utah. It's nestled in one of the best ski towns in America and in the world. We're a little biased.
Or we'll come to you.
Or we'll come to you, and we'll have office hours later tomorrow if you'd like to speak with us individually, and we look forward to getting to know you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, everybody. Go make a difference.